In this episode, Christopher Zellman, principal at Prager Metis, discusses the key responsibilities of a CFO and shares his experiences working with businesses to achieve their growth objectives. This conversation also takes a deep dive into various financial risks and compliance challenges that businesses face and explores strategies for mitigating them. This podcast aims at helping us get a better grasp on how outsourced CFO services can offer more value to businesses than just conventional financial management. Listen further to explore how these services can extend into the areas of strategic planning and leadership development. Welcome to the Prager Metis podcast, where we explore the topics that impact business growth and expansion. I'm your host, Shreya Acharya, and today we have a special guest with us. Please join me in welcoming Christopher Zellman, principal at Prager Metis.
Thank you and happy to be here.
We're thrilled to have you, Christopher. But before we dive into our discussion on the role of outsourced CFO services, could you please share with our listeners what inspired you to pursue a career in CFO services and how your experiences prepared you for your current role at Prager Metis?
Yes, I spent about 17 years of my 30-plus year career at a service company who went through a tremendous amount of growth. When I started with the company, they were about $200 million in revenue. When I left, they were about $1 billion in revenue. And during my career there, I made contacts with a lot of individuals who encouraged me once I was leaving the firm to pursue consulting, specifically with CFO advisory services, because a lot of my experience during my career would benefit someone, with the experience I had.
That's fascinating, Christopher. I'm sure your extensive experience in this field certainly sets a solid foundation for your current role here. What would you say are some of the key responsibilities of a CFO, and how, in your opinion, can this role contribute to a company's growth and, say, overall financial success?
Yeah, so a CFO is the overall finance leader of the organization, and they really need to be in front of, strategy and growth for the organization to support the needs of the organization, just not within the finance area, but really throughout the whole organization, because they should have a pulse on kind of what's happening in the organization and what needs to happen, currently and in the future.
Christopher, I'm sure you would agree that as a company grows and evolves, the role of a CFO changes as well, and they perhaps need to shift into a more strategic player role rather than just focus on day-to-day operations. So could you perhaps shed some light on specific challenges that CFOs face along this journey?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. So as a CFO in a small company, they may be wearing a lot of different hats, meaning, they may be more involved in the day-to-day, even some of the accounting that's happening. But as the company continues to grow and evolve, they really need to remove themselves from that day-to-day and be more of a strategic player, and looking at growth and looking at where the company's going to be headed, working really closely with the CEO to make sure that the company's going to be positioned well for the future.
That actually brings me to my next question. How can a company with limited resources or financial expertise leverage outsourced CFO services to help them gain insights that they need to make informed decisions and achieve their overall objectives?
Yeah, CFO services can really help companies in various different stages. So if a company's in a growth mode and they might not have really built out the infrastructure within the finance department with all the expertise they may need, certainly CFO service can assist there. If they're going through a transaction, whether it's being acquired or maybe they're acquiring somebody, CFO service can certainly help in those areas. And then just some regular, what I call financial planning and analysis, or what's called FP&A, if there's special kind of metrics or key performance indicators, which is known as KPIs, that the company is looking to implement, CFO services could certainly help in those areas too.
I think it's very clear from your answer that outsourced CFO services definitely helps bridge the gap for companies by providing them financial expertise that they could need in order to succeed. Let's talk about the balance between automation and personalized support, Christopher. So, how do you, as an outsourced CFO, strike the balance when working with your clients?
Yeah, I mean, technology is always going to be something we want to embrace, and it's great to have technology to to provide information, but really trying to understand that information and how it's going to affect the business today and tomorrow is really key. And I think outsourced CFO services can really provide that independent view of what metrics are kind of happening in the business and what they're driving for the future.
I definitely think that that's a great approach towards technology and how things are advancing as well. But one more thing that has really caught my curiosity is that there are many misconceptions that surround the role of a CFO, and I'm sure there are many that you have come across as well. So how do you address these misconceptions when you're working with these clients?
I think it's important for clients to understand the role of the CFO and really the life cycle of the organization. If the organization has gone through a lot of growth, it's important that the client understands that the CFO's role really needs to expand behind the accounting finance world and really into the whole organization, whether it's working with operations, sales and marketing, HR. It's really important that a CFO is very active and partnering with the leaders of those organizations to make sure that they're all marching towards the same goals.
Let's move on to hear a success story, Christopher. Could you perhaps share a specific example of a client who engaged your services to achieve their growth objectives and maybe share how you helped them achieve these goals?
Sure. A private equity firm had recently went through acquiring a business. It was a family-owned business. So the family-owned business did not have a very sophisticated financial structure and a financial system. So they needed assistance with the month-end close, the annual audit. We helped implement a budgeting and forecasting module, which had never been done for this acquisition. And then a 13-week cash forecasting model, which any company that gets acquired, cash is usually a big driver because it was a manufacturing company and there was a lot of inventory being purchased for resale. So they really need to understand the cash flow requirements. So building that model helped them really understand, kind of what was happening in the business.
Looking into the future, how do you see the role of a CFO evolving, and what skills do you think would be most important for CFOs to possess in the coming years?
Yeah, I mean, a CFO needs to certainly have those strong, accounting, finance, accounting, finance, technical ability, but they also need to be able to partner with other people in the organization, develop those soft skills, whether it's writing, it's articulating, and partnering with other senior leaders to help the company continue to grow and continue to evolve as things change in the marketplace.
That's an insightful perspective, and I like that you touched upon soft skills also being an equal contributor towards their overall success. And it's very clear that CFOs need to stay ahead of the curve to successfully navigate this constantly changing and evolving dynamic business landscape. Lastly, what advice would you give to business owners or executives who are considering outsourcing their CFO services for the first time? Like, what would be the key benefits that a company could potentially see by outsourcing this key function?
Yeah, I think a company needs to kind of look at, where they are in their current life cycle, and if there's certain information that would help them drive business results better. I think that's where we could come in and kind of take a look at what their current metrics are, or kind of current key performance indicators are, and hopefully shed some light on those to see how they can help enhance performance. We can help in a lot of different areas. If there's a financial planning and analysis project that they're working on that they need some additional bandwidth or just some additional expertise in areas where they might not have a lot of strength in.
Well, I think this was an extremely insightful conversation, Christopher. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and shedding light on the role of an outsourced CFO. It has been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast, and I'm sure all of our listeners have also learned a lot.
Yeah, thanks everybody for their time, and look forward to speaking to you soon.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to this podcast of Prager Metis. We hope you gained valuable insights into the role of a CFO and the impact of outsourced CFO services. Stay tuned for more engaging conversations with industry experts.